Hello YouTube, De-bodgery here. This is probably the final version of my tool post grinder. Tonight I finished up the last thing I had to do, and that was, you can see in my previous video I showed myself making that screw hole pattern in there, and so those were all threaded for M4, and that completely goes around the front. And let me scoot around the other side so that's a little more visible. So you can see those screw holes in here, and you can see I have an M4 screw in there. So in my spindle block there is 2 screw holes in it, and they have a chamfered hole, and the end of the screw is also chamfered. So I thread it in and it's kind of like locks into that wedge shape in there, and those 2 holes in the spindle block are slightly offset from each other. What that does is this. So those 12 holes, they give me, basically 30 degrees of rotation, increments. But then because those 2 holes are offset from each other, this is slightly offset this way, which is what I intended. And then and right now I'm in the bottom hole in my spindle block, and if I use that top hole in there, that makes this whole thing kind of tilt that way, just a little, So if that's like 10 degrees this way, then the other hole makes it 10 degrees that way. So it gives me a nice little offset, and then of course with 12 holes around, I've got lots of positions I can choose from. Because the idea is that the spindle block and the tool holder can be taken off. The whole thing can be flipped around, moved in different directions. For example, like if I want to run the machine this way, then I have to take it off the tool post, flip this over, clamp it back in again, and then it's pointing that direction, because I'd be using this front face of the quick change tool post. But yeah, anyway, having those degrees of tilt in there helps a lot with that. And it's not meant to be really rigid, but the truth of the matter is it hasn't flopped over yet, and I've used it extensively, like namely to make that thing, and also to play around with this little piece of aluminum. And it never moved anywhere, just leaning over. So I'm not sure I even care. But anyway, there's a little bit of movement in here, but not much. And quite frankly, I don't even think that it's going to matter. Anyway, yeah, this piece of aluminum is all machined out of a single piece of 6061. And that replaces my old one, which is, a piece of 1/4 inch screwed to another piece of 1/4 inch, screwed to a piece of 1/8 inch aluminum. I reused one of the screws in to make that screw over there. But yeah, this is a bit of a bodge. And also you can see all those little dimples around there. I screwed up this bearing seat right here. It was much too large, and it left about 1/2 millimeter gap around the bearing. So I used a punch to dimple the aluminum to cause it to shrink a little bit around the bearing. That worked, but yeah, I didn't make any mistakes on this one. That's a perfect fit, so I don't have to worry about it anymore. This was, and you can see I did the same thing on this side. I dimpled that side too to get the aluminum to shrink in. Also, you can see those 4 holes in there, so those are also M4. That was so I could do the same thing. I just never implemented it. But yeah, this was a bodge. It was my rough draft. I never intended it to be permanent, not unless it turned out perfectly the first time, which it didn't. So yeah, toss that bad boy in the scrap bin. Anyway, here it is, all done, it's set up, and working great. It's just like it did before.